Welcome to the Brand Boss Show, empowering you to rock your brand like a boss. This show exists to share all the tools, tips, and secrets you need to maximize the impact of your brand.
Welcome back, Brand Boss. This podcast is brought to you by the Brand Boss Studio, empowering business owners and entrepreneurs to own your difference powerfully and authentically and rock your brand like a boss. For more information on all the ways we can help you rock your brand, go to brandbossstudio.com, and that link is in the show notes as well. All right, let's get to today's episode. So this week, I am honored to have as my guest Ryan Haley. Ryan is a business coach. He is a successful real estate investor, and he has an incredibly diverse background, very similar to my own, as some of you have heard here on the show. And I won't give too much of that away for now, but Ryan, it's an honor to have you here today.
Thanks, Rachel. It's an honor to be here and kind of be on the other side of the mic, so to speak, from a couple weeks ago when we did your interview.
It's true. So, Ryan, I know we've been having a lot of conversations, like a little backstory, brand bosses. Ryan and I met on his podcast, through his podcast, just a couple of weeks ago. And he has an incredible book I definitely recommend. It's called A Better Way. And I will put that link in the show notes as well. But one of the things that he talks about in this book is something that I know is a real passion for him. And when we were talking about what to, talk about on today's episode, this came up, and I just feel like it's such a perfect fit because you know that we're always talking about identity, because that is truly the foundation of every successful brand. Because when you know who you are, you can function from that place. And that word identity has a lot of components to it. And there are really some identity clues that can even be strewn throughout your life. And sometimes it takes somebody, it takes an outside eye maybe sometimes to help somebody find those for yourself so you can take them and run with it. So again, I want to let Ryan share his own message here, but that's what I'm really excited that he's going to be talking about today, is how you find those identity clues and what to do when you find them. So Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's a great way to cue it up. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about, as you mentioned, I talk about in the book and a lot of different things, is what I call the sweet spot. And if anybody's played tennis before, you know what the sweet spot is. It's that place just right in that perfect spot in the center of the racket where you hit the ball and it just feels effortless, but you still get a lot of power and accuracy. And it's basically where you hit your best shots. And so I found that there's this analogy between the sweet spot on a tennis racket and a sweet spot with somebody's identity or design, personality. And the way I describe this sweet spot is the intersection of four different things. You could think of this as four circles overlapping like a Venn diagram. And so one of them is your deepest passion, what you love, what makes your blood flow, what makes you come alive. The other one that's closely related, and it kind of sounds a little counterintuitive, is your deepest pain. Mm-hmm. And that's what I refer to as the story of your struggle. Those things that you've had to deal with throughout life, those wounds, those, frustrations, those things that are, wrong with the world or what's happened with you that you can carry a solution to, that you're deeply invested in. And then you also have your strength. And a lot of people probably are familiar with strengths finders and a bunch of different personality tests. And those are the things that come really naturally to you, what you just naturally excel at. It's not hard. You can just do it very well without trying that much. And then the final part is your service, which is the value or benefit that you add to other people. And so when you get that intersection of all those four things, your passion, your pain, your strength, and your service, that's what I call the sweet spot. And that's where I believe people are going to find their purpose. They're going to find their calling, if you will. You're going to become much more fulfilled personally and a lot more professionally effective, because basically when you're doing what you love most and do best, you're going to add the most value to other people. And as we all know, as business people, compensation is ultimately tied to value. So odds are, if you love what you're doing with a crazy passion and you're incredibly good at it, you're uniquely brilliant at it, you're going to be adding the most value and service to other people, which is going to compensate you the most in a variety of ways, obviously financially, but also professionally, emotionally, spiritually, in all these different ways. You're going to be kind of, hitting on all cylinders, and you're going to be in that place where you feel alive, and you might be working a lot, which I can attest to. Recently, we've had a lot of conversations recently, Rachel, but it doesn't feel like work because you're in that sweet spot. And so, that's just something that's been layered over years that I've been looking into this and studying things and just putting it together. And that's kind of the, I guess the connection point between all these things that I've been thinking about. And I think has a lot of relevance to what you do with branding and just, our value proposition as business people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a powerful concept, that idea of the sweet spot, and this idea that when you are truly functioning in that sweet spot, like you said, you're doing what makes your heart come alive. You're also speaking from, your pain. You're able to take your pain and mine it for the gold. I know that's something you and I have had a lot of conversations about. And, brand bosses, on this show that I've talked about my own journey and learning to own my own difference. And really, that was my superpower in disguise. And I think that sounds kind of like what you're describing there, Ryan, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, Rachel, because one of the things that I found about the sweet spot is that it's sometimes easy to overlook when you're actually operating from it, at least in certain aspects. And again, coming back to the tennis analogy, as I did some research on this for a presentation, I thought it was uncanny, the connections between the two, because one of the things as I looked it up and got the official definition, was that the sweet spot is the place on the tennis racket where it's so smooth and effortless that the player is almost unaware that the impact has occurred.
Wow.
Yeah, that hit me like a ton of bricks.
No kidding. I mean, that's like you were talking about. I know I've heard it described before as like being in the flow. When you're just in the flow, you're in your zone, you're doing what you were born to do, and it resonates with all these 4 areas. It's so true. I mean, I know we've had all kinds of conversations about this. Some of it healthy, some of it not healthy. But like for me, it's like when it's 3 a.m. and I'm working on something and it's like, I don't even care. Not that that's a healthy thing. I'm not advising that you do that. But I'm just saying that idea that you're just in the flow, you're in the zone, and you're not even aware sometimes that that's what you are. You're in your sweet spot. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely. And that was a perfect, recap. What I found is that I believe all of us are uniquely wired with certain dispositions, skill sets, natural talents, and gifts. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't really understand what their gift or their talent or strength is. And that was true for me for a long time. To give you an example, I was talking to somebody, this is probably about 8 years ago. And I was talking to someone and I had just met them that day. They were about 20 years older than me. And this person just started opening up and kind of spilling their guts to me, and saying just all of this stuff came out. And she kind of caught herself after a while. And she's like, Ryan, I can't believe I'm telling you this. Like, I never tell anybody this stuff, let alone someone who's 20 years younger than me. And if I had a nickel, Rachel, for every time something like that has happened throughout my life, I'd be a lot better off than I am now. And in that moment, it was like this moment of clarity hit me, because I had been kind of thinking about, these things, like, what are my gifts? What is my strength? What is, all these things. And in that moment, it was like for the 700th time, finally the light went off, and it was like, hey, this is not just some random thing or some coincidence. Like, without even trying, I just have this, what I don't even know what it is, but just people consistently feel, safe and comfortable. And this happens over and over again. And so what I came to recognize in that moment was that I have a gift of empathic listening and counseling to people that just makes them feel comfortable opening up, and I can give them advice. And many times it's with people I've never even met before, like this example. And now that I'm aware of it, I want to be more intentional to use that gift and to honor it for what it is. And I think it's the same thing with a lot of other people. For example, there was somebody I was interviewing several years ago on my podcast who she just loved making these little trinkets. They're just little keepsakes, and she would just do them for fun on her spare time. She was good at it, and she just gave them to her friends for free, just, as a blessing. And she was in a car accident, and because of that, she couldn't work. So she was trying to figure out a way to make ends meet. And she's making these things on the side, and her friends just love it so much. And they're like, we want to pay you for this. In fact, we are going to pay you for this. And she was like, no, it's just a little. And they're like, no, you don't understand. This is blessing us. And so for her, it was just like, she didn't even think twice about it. Now for me, that is the last thing in the world I would be able to do. I am not a hands-on, crafty kind of person at all, but for her, it just naturally flowed. And then so eventually she recognized it, because her friends brought it up to her and forced her to receive payment from them. And eventually she turned that into a really successful business. And it was amazing what happened through that. So, I mean, insert your own example of how this works, but it's so, again, when you hit that tennis ball in the sweet spot, it's probably the same for golf players. I don't play golf, but it's just so smooth. It's so easy and effortless. It's like, it literally does like almost not even feel like you hit the ball. And at the same time, when you hit out of your sweet spot, and I've experienced this on the court before too, you definitely know it because it's not smooth. It's not effortless. You feel jarring vibration in the handle. It's painful. It's not a very good shot. And unfortunately, I think most people are much more acquainted with where they're not hitting in their sweet spot. And it's easy to be your own worst critic and say like, oh, I'm not good at this. And so the tendency can be, oh, I want to really shore up my weaknesses and get better at this, aspect of, what I'm weak at. And there's a place for personal growth and development and getting stretched. I'm a huge believer in that, as anybody who knows me can attest. But I think you're going to find a lot more effectiveness, a lot more return on investment for your time and effort, and a lot more fulfillment and joy when you focus most of your time on hitting in your sweet spot. And this is the same thing that the StrengthsFinder book talks about, which was, revolutionary for me. I love that book. I would definitely recommend it to people. But so it's like, instead of trying to go against the grain of who you are and what your natural, inclinations are, try to focus on hitting in that sweet spot. And there's another example called the Pareto principle, or 80-20 rule, that talks about investing, you're going to get 80% of your output from 20% of your inputs, whether those 20% are customers, referral sources, whatever that is, there's going to be that disproportionate impact. But unfortunately, most people spend their time on that 80% that's only giving them the 20% instead of the 20% that's giving them the 80%, if that makes sense.
It does. It was a lot of numbers, but I followed you. No, it definitely does. So let's unpack this idea of the sweet spot a little bit more. So you mentioned kind of briefly in the beginning each one of the 4 categories. Can you break those down a little bit more and maybe give an example of, because I know you have so many powerful stories in your own life, maybe give an example of what that's looked like in your own life, or maybe how you kind of found a sweet spot in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, one of the biggest pain points that I've had is, anxiety, lack of fulfillment in my work, on a professional basis, just boredom or drudgery professionally. And then just kind of suffering from an overall performance mindset, a lot of striving, like I have a high value for excellence. And, I was in the military. That's part of my background that you alluded to. And that got, really deeply drilled into me. I was already like that before I joined the military, and then it was even more so after. And there's a lot of good aspects to all those things. Like obviously having, discipline and a work ethic and a desire to, get excellence and results in everything you do is great. But the downside is, it caused me to be very anxious and performance oriented and kind of could get easily overwhelmed. So that's, the anxiety and the lack of fulfillment in my work have been 2 real pain points for me throughout my life. So most of the time your passion is connected to the pain, as I mentioned earlier. And so for me, one of my biggest passions is, finding what I love doing for a job. And I realized for me personally, there wasn't a job I could get as an employee. I had to kind of create it in an entrepreneurial context, right? Yeah, it's a lot of people like that. And so and now that I've been able to do that, I'm really passionate about helping other people to find that. So that's a big part of my why. And I would say the passion and the pain are both a powerful part of your why. What Simon Sinek talks about is your deeply abiding purpose, cause, or belief. What drives you to do what you do, and really what's at the center of who you are. And that's, from a branding or a, value proposition in the marketplace perspective, your why, your, deep purpose, cause, or belief, that's what people are going to resonate with. And that's what I think is going to help you to position yourself and add the most value to other people and receive the most value in return. So again, there's that, both of those things, what you love and what you hate, I think come together powerfully to help you have this incredible fire in the belly to make a difference in the world. And it's also on the pain. I found that when you've gone through something really deeply, a real big struggle, a deep wound, or some kind of struggle in your life that you've had to overcome and maybe you're still working on, you're most likely going to have a lot more compassion and empathy for other people who struggle with that as well. And that's not to say that you can't relate or, add value or service to people who haven't had the same experiences or vice versa. But generally, I think that gives you a sense of personal investment and identification that people can relate to. And it's going to make you have, I think, more credibility and authority because you've earned your stripes in the battlefield of life, so to speak. And people, I think, can sense that. And then again, deeply connected to, another part of what I'm passionate about is helping people get out of that anxiety, that striving performance mindset, and enter into, a place of rest, which doesn't necessarily mean, lack of activity or intentionality, but it's that flow you talked about where you can just get lost in something for hours and it doesn't feel like work, even though you're being incredibly productive. So those two things are really related. And those are a couple of my personal examples. For me, a strength is it's something you're naturally really good at. And most of the time that's going to be something that you like, because you usually don't like things you're not good at. If you're really good at something, odds are you're going to enjoy it, but not necessarily all the time. So for me, a strength is something that you are obviously very good at doing, but it doesn't necessarily mean something that you love. Now, for me personally, I have a gift, or I would say a strength of administration, structure, certain things like that. That's how I'm, naturally wired. And I will absolutely bring that to bear in my business and in my personal life. What's that on the spreadsheet?
Yeah, which is so awesome and I love that you can own that about yourself. And I know we had this conversation that you were like recently coming to say, you know what, this is who I am and I'm going to own it. And I think you even used that word. And it's just so powerful because sometimes there are these things that either, to your point, we overlook or we don't like about ourselves, right? Or we think that, oh, well, this can't really be my strength, or this isn't popular. I'll fill in the blank, whatever it is, or somebody said something about this, and so therefore this can't be my strength. And I think, we were kind of joking about this before, but like I am totally creative, visionary, all that kind of stuff. If there was nobody in the world whose strength was structure, this would be a very like flip-floppy kind of, world, right? And so I love that you can own that as your strength and that you've come to that place, because it's such a fabulous, asset to be able to share with people, because for you, you're just wired that way, right? Like you just speak and numbers flow out of your mouth. And I'm like, wait, I need a calculator, So whatever. And that usually, in my experience, correct me if I'm wrong, that tends to be what our strength is. Like you said, we overlook it and we're like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just this thing I do. This lady who made the trinkets, whatever it is, like, it's just this thing I do. Right. But what we don't realize sometimes is what's easy for us isn't necessarily easy for everybody else.
Definitely. Yeah.
And there is incredible value in bringing that strength that you might think is no big deal to the marketplace, because people need the solution that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. And I have seen that go the other way though, too, which is where people are really good at something, like I am good, like you said, at running numbers and spreadsheets and organization and structure. So, the military was a good fit in some senses, but in that context, and we can talk more about this in a little bit, that was not life-giving to me. So it wasn't a gift, because what I consider a gift is something that you're not only good at, but you get enjoyment and, it fills you up. You feel more full than drained afterwards. Whereas, if all I did was administration and spreadsheets and never had that personal interaction, that kind of more right brain visionary thing, I would get, it would eventually, start to drain me. And, for example, one of my clients, he's really, really good at technology. He's a tech support guy for many years. Effortlessly comes to him. He's able to add a lot of service there. And, he's definitely found a lot of, good compensation in the marketplace as an employee doing that. But after doing it for over a decade now, he realizes it's not ultimately his passion. So there's a part of that he can use, but if that's all he does every day for the rest of his life, he's going to be really more and more increasingly unfulfilled and dissatisfied, whereas there's a place for that. So I think it is important to distinguish, a lot of people can either overlook their strengths or they overfunction in their strength at to the exclusion or the detriment of their passion. Yeah. And so that's why all these things come together. So in this case, with my one client, he's got an incredible strength at tech and he's able to add a lot of service and value, but he doesn't have the passion. So there's a couple intersections and that's good. But like I said, the best thing is to have all of those working together. And so to kind of bring it more full circle, or four circles, if you will, together, I have found that I have this very big picture, visionary kind of like relational orientation on the one hand. And I also have this super left brain, detail oriented, analytical aspect to myself. And what I love is bringing those together so that I can help people, because I do a couple different things. One thing is, I do the inspirational communication and the personal development through my company called A Better Way. So the book, the podcast, a blog, coaching, teaching and presentations, public speaking, all that stuff. But I also have this real deep love and, inclination for financial investments and doing a lot of projections and analysis and helping people get their finances in order. So what I found is that there's a lot of convergence for me all coming together in one place where for instance, if I'm working with a coaching client and they're trying to figure out the big picture stuff, like what is my gift, right? What is my sweet spot? How do I start operating in that? And we'll go through that process. And that's really life-giving for me. And we'll finally identify like, okay, it's based on this. You've gone through the worksheet, you've done, the self-assessment and gotten a lot of feedback. So here we've identified your sweet spot, your calling, like the direction and vision you want to go for your life. But okay, great. So now what? Like, how do we walk that out practically to get there? And with a lot of my coaching clients, almost without exception, as we keep working together, eventually it comes to finances, because what I find is that whether you're a high paid employee or you're trying to, you're struggling and you want to get, debt free or whatever it is, a lot of times finances are what hold people back from stepping into their sweet spot and living from that place, full time for the rest of their life. So then we'll start getting into, the financial planning aspect of what I do with another company, and that connects. Or it could go the other way. I could be working with someone who's doing extremely well in their finances, and we're putting together an awesome plan, and, things are only going to get better. But then it's like, okay, well, that's great. We've, done the numbers and the analysis, we've dug in here, but like at the end of the day, what's the point of all this, right? Like you're going to have a lot more money. You're going to be able to retire earlier. Awesome. So for what purpose, right? To what end? And so then I can connect it back. So my kind of natural gifts of that empathic listening and encouragement come together with that strength of financial analysis and detail orientation to where I can combine all these things in a context that I love. And, I would say another way to describe the sweet spot is, getting well paid to do what you love most and do best.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I can't take credit for that. I heard Lance Wallnow say that, and he might've got it from someone else, but that's really what it is. Yeah. I mean, it's what a sweet deal, getting well paid to do what you love most and do best. I mean, it's beautiful. So now my part of my passion why is helping other people to be able to walk that same journey out, because it's just an incredibly life-giving, place to be. So that hopefully kind of ties together some of those aspects and, can make it more relatable. But I have a whole teaching on that if people are interested in more. But does that kind of summarize what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think it's interesting too, because you brought up finances, and without giving away too much of your story, I know that wasn't a path you were looking for. it was kind of, in many ways, a path that found you when you were you had your plan and you were going this direction, and then things shifted as they often do. And that, that's definitely
Right.
something that happened in my own life as well. And it's up to you how much of that you want to share. But I just think it's so interesting because, like you were saying, you got to very high levels in that career.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should mention some of those if you're comfortable with it. Like, you got
Sure.
to very high levels in that financial experience, and you were making really good money, but it was soul killing, essentially.
It was. Yeah. Great point. I'm happy to dig into that because I think it's really important. So what Rachel's referring to is I was in the Navy for just under 11 years. And my last assignment was at the Pentagon doing defense budgeting and, analysis for the budget, and working on, a huge portfolio, like, $4.5 billion annual appropriation, running a lot of numbers, getting well paid, making six figures, getting, some of the best benefits in the world as an active duty, naval officer. And I was just crunching PowerPoints and spreadsheets in a cubicle all day. And I have never hated a job more in my entire life than that. And it was somewhat aligned with my natural personality and some of my strengths and even passions now, but it was the context made a huge difference. And so even though I was it was a pretty sweet deal when I really look at it objectively, I was generally into the office by 7:45, out by 5. I had 2 or 3 hours to eat and work out for lunch, and a lot of autonomy. But it just was soul killing. Like you said, it just sucked the life out of me. And I realized I didn't want to be doing that. I didn't care, and I was kind of setting myself up for that was my last assignment. So I was going to get out. And the idea was I would go do the same thing for, in the private sector as a defense contractor and make a ton of money. And that's, the career path I was headed for. But I just realized I can't do this. I will not do this. And so I needed something that was more life-giving, like I mentioned earlier, the more relational, personal, at the same time. What was really instructive for me is in that period, I had some of the most amazing personal growth and personal connections that I've ever had. I was part of a small group at a church, and, it was just a vibrant community, and we were all, just really growing and connecting. And it was just an amazing formative, personal journey for all of us together. So it was like this growing, dichotomy between who I was, Ryan Haley, the small group leader in church, versus Lieutenant Haley wearing the uniform and, going into the cubicle every day to do this stuff. And I just realized that wasn't going to be life-giving for me long term. So I got out, and then that's when I jumped into, just both feet into the world of entrepreneurship, and started as a realtor, and have had a lot of journeys, back and forth since then. But so it's funny though, because what I do now and what I love so much is almost the same thing. I'm spending hours and hours every day crunching spreadsheets, detailed analysis, financial planning and budgeting, and putting some PowerPoints and, presentations together. But I love it, Rachel. And the difference is it's aligned with my why. It's aligned with the context. For me, I hated feeling like just a cog in a massive, bureaucratic wheel, and not feeling like I had immediate impact. It was like the stuff we were doing was going to hit the fleet in, 3 or 4 years. And I was never going to see that impact. And for some people, they can get satisfaction out of that. And I actually used to really feel bad about myself that I didn't have more investment in what I was doing. I wasn't more motivated. I felt bad about the fact that I didn't like my work, but it didn't help. Whereas now I have direct personal connections, eyeball to eyeball, even through Zoom or whatever. And I can see, even writing the book and getting your, feedback was amazing, seeing the impact it had, so it's just the context is different, and I'm able to leverage and align those things that were still working in that other context, but just in a way that has a lot more meaning and significance for me personally. And I've seen that it has, I think, a lot more value to the people that I'm interacting with. So that's been a really interesting journey. And it wasn't even until very recently that I got full time into the financial services industry. And I just love it. I know I'm where I need to be. And yet, like I said, I can still combine that perfectly with more of the personal development, inspirational communication type stuff that I'm doing. So for me, it's been, a 10+ year journey in the making, but it has been so worth it to get to this point. And to be able to help other people get out of that grind, out of that performance mindset, or even maybe out of that high paying job that's not really fulfilling, for them, and help them chart a course to a different path that's better for them, with the personal coaching and or the financial planning, that brings me incredible satisfaction. And I also see that it brings a lot of value to my clients.
And that's the power of the sweet spot right there. I was just thinking when you were talking that sometimes high paying jobs come with a high price tag.
Yes.
And there comes a point where it's like, is it worth it? Is it worth it not to like you lose your soul, but is it worth it to do something that literally like sucks the life out of you versus being able to do what makes your heart come alive? And I think it's so cool what you do, Ryan, because you have that gift of empathetic listening, which is a huge, huge value to bring to your clients. Because how many financial services are there out there that you're literally just another number, right?
Yeah.
And so for you to be able to be genuinely invested in the lives of people that you're working with and listening to their stories and whatever, I chuckled when you were saying that, because I've had that happen to me for years too. People are like, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but and you're like, okay, I thought we were getting together to talk about branding, but you're telling me your whole life story. Let's go.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
exactly.
a thing. It's a thing,
Yeah.
But it's just, there's something so powerful in making people feel seen, heard, and valued. And it really is, like we talk about in another episode, about dignifying others with value is really what we do. That's what business is all about. And so to be able to dignify them with value by providing that real empathetic listening, and then you bring this incredible wealth of knowledge and experience that you have in the financial side,
right?
You help them, and your passion for, okay, let's get you out of that like soul killing thing that you're doing right now. I mean, that's really, really powerful. I feel like we hit 3 areas, but there's one more, isn't there?
We talked about the pain and the passion earlier on. They talked about strength and service going together.
Gotcha.
So it's and a lot, again, there's a lot of overlap. It's like, there's no black and white. This is where one ends and the other begins, but generally that's the best way I've been able to think about it. But applying it to different contexts is important too. And like you just said, Rachel, that active listening, it's funny because I'm going through some continuing education for financial planning designation I'm getting right now. And interestingly, from, a totally, secular and financial only context, it was interesting for me as someone who's been a personal coach for a while to see that the behavioral coaching aspect of financial advising, financial planning, all that stuff is the most important thing, according to Vanguard, which is like the biggest investment firm in the world. And then from a really well-respected, very successful financial planner and blogger, he said that the number one skill that separates the best financial planners from the rest is active listening. And I thought that was so interesting from 2 independent sources within the financial services industry, that was this coaching stuff that I'm talking about, this kind of more touchy-feely heart stuff, whatever you want to call it, that even in this super numbers-driven analytical environment, those 2 things are by far the most important, that are going to add the most value to the client, and that are also going to make you the most successful in your practice, is being able to truly listen and hear where people are coming from, as opposed to just being a hammer looking for a nail, trying to just, tell them why this one thing you have is better, versus just kind of sitting back, listening with no preconceived notions and just being like, okay, for you, I think this is probably a good way to go. And that's a huge part of my practice, is that, I'm not ever going to recommend a certain strategy or product or service for somebody if I don't know their entire, financial picture. And I also want to know more about their personal picture and their goals, right? Because at the end of the day, the whole point of having a financial plan and these goals is to facilitate the life you want to live. And so for me, that's a super important part of the process. And what might be a no-brainer for one client would be totally inappropriate for another client, and vice versa. So that active listening, that desire to really connect with people and find out where they are financially, personally, and everything else comes together. And, one of the greatest, as you know, I've been working on a huge case with a client for several months, and it's just literally closing today, which is amazing. So that's been really rewarding in a lot of ways. But one of the most, I guess, personally meaningful aspects of that engagement that I just found out recently was that this client, obviously very high net worth, doing very well financially, set up for, a retirement at a much earlier age than most people. So they've got that part of it down. But what made me feel so good about, having spent all this time and effort with this client and everything we're putting together is that it's going to help him get into that place of rest and peace and get out of striving, because as smart as he is and as driven as he is and as wise as he's been with his, money and his personal decisions, he's had to deal with this sense of burden or responsibility for his family to learn as much as he can about every different investment or, financial strategy to be able to, secure them, a prosperous retirement. And, he's otherwise in amazing health, but he said, it's not uncommon if he wakes up at 2 or 3 in the morning and it's just the wheels are spinning, right? Because it's just mind's constantly active. He's trying to figure stuff out. And so for him, and especially his wife, who she's not nearly as, financially savvy as us, but she's just got this kind of simple childlike faith that she's able to do really well in her business, and she's kind of go with the flow. And she really defers to her husband in a lot of things, but the biggest thing for her she loved about our engagement and the whole plan that we put together is that it relieves him of a lot of that pressure and stress to figure it out on his own and constantly be striving to make this happen. And then hopefully he can sleep all the way through the night and, just be able to relax and enjoy that time they have together. And so to hear that, connect with the extreme level of detail and, financial planning, analysis, all the different things we're doing with a lot of moving parts and a very large, sophisticated strategy it's so rewarding. I get to scratch the itch on both sides of the brain, if you will, and to see the impact, not only financially for that client, but ultimately for the purposes of getting him into a place of peace and rest and an ability to truly enjoy time with his family and, not let life pass him by because he's worried about the future. That's to me like the best possible, outcome of all worlds.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. All of these things that you're doing over here and number crunching and all this kind of stuff is directly impacting this man's life and his family and his marriage and his future. That's incredible.
Yeah. I don't think there's any better gift in the world than to truly love what you do for a living, to be successful and profitable at doing it, and to see other people, profitable and successful and having purpose and joy in their lives. I mean, that's just going from that one extreme of hating it so much at the Pentagon to now doing very similar things, but just the same level of, hatred and discontent I had is completely flipped. I mean, it's just amazing, but it's taken a long time to get there, and it is a journey. And I'd say if anybody's listening and you feel like it's been, an endless desert march for years on end, I can certainly relate to that. I was just talking to my parents and some friends who have seen kind of like the sacrifices I made walking away from that high paying job that sucked the life out of me, to many years of kind of toiling in obscurity, to just now seeing a ton of breakthrough and success in a variety of ways, all coming together at once. It's awesome, but it's easy to lose sight of when people share from the stage or from a book. Even it's easy to just skip over all the hard things and capture the highlights. But I really try to share both the struggles as well as the success, because I think both are really important, and that journey is critical. So I can say, to a lot of people, it might look like all this stuff is just happening overnight, but I can say, it's the overnight success that took 10 years to make.
I love that you brought that up, because I think that's something, that whole quote about don't compare your middle to somebody else's like chapter 27, right?
Yeah. It's good. I like that.
And I think that's something that so many times we as entrepreneurs, as business owners, can get caught up in, because you hear these amazing stories and you're like, wow, that's so incredible for this person. But I've been slugging away, and I'm just not seeing it yet, or I'm stuck at this corporate job, or I'm here, there, wherever. And it's like, on that journey, like, I hear what you're talking about, Ryan. I would love to find my sweet spot. I would love to see that happen. You know, I've been at this a while. I still haven't found it yet. Like, what about that person who maybe doesn't even know where to begin to go on that journey to find their sweet spot? What would you say to them?
Well, I'm thinking of a quote that I love from Howard Thurman. He was a civil rights activist and educator. And I just love the way he shares this. And it just goes, perfectly with everything we're talking about. He says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs are people who have come alive.
Yes.
Yes.
That makes me like want to shout.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, that was such a revelation to me when I read that. And it just lines up so perfectly, and what I say in a lot of these presentations I give on the sweet spot is, that sweet spot, that's where you come alive. And that's where you're going to help other people come alive. And I think a lot of us have a well-meaning but misdirected notion of what we should do, right? And being in the military, I was very familiar with, duty, discipline, obligation, all that kind of stuff. And those are, again, good characteristics to an extent. But if your entire life is lived by feeling like you need to do this or you need to do that, and you're always asking what the world or someone else needs, then it can lead you to that place of burnout. And you're not going to be as, effective or valuable to other people. And you're certainly not going to be fulfilled and effective personally. So I would say for some people, like, I know a lot of people who kind of just got steered in a direction from a young age. It's like, okay, it's doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Like, those are my options, right? And maybe they're really good at that. Maybe they like it, but a lot of them might not. And it's like, maybe that person was meant to be an artist, and that sounds crazy. And I had to go from a lot of different weird things, from helicopter pilot in the Navy to, all these different things. And now it's like, I've had to walk a very, off the beaten path journey, very unconventional, but it's been so rewarding. So I would say, first of all, honestly assess within yourself, is this really what you want to do? Is this where your talents, your gifts, your passions, time, money, energy is best spent? And if not, even if you're in that high paying job, or even if you're not, whatever the case is, be willing to think differently and shift, even perhaps in a radically different direction. Because, just logically, if what you're doing isn't working, then what I like to say is at least try to fail differently.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, that takes the pressure off, right? Especially for someone who's performance driven, perfectionistic like me. It's just like, okay, this is just going to be an open-handed, what I call a prayerful experiment. We're just going to try this and see how it works. But what I know I'm not going to do is continue. They say that insanity is, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. So if you've been banging your head against that same wall repeatedly for years and that's not working, hey, go bang your head against that other wall for a little bit and at least see if that works. Maybe you'll get some breakthrough out of it. But I think being open to, even if it takes a complete 180 in your career trajectory, in your business, in your whatever it is that you're doing, being open to that. And then, like I said, also for me, after a while of doing that, I finally found a really clear, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a very clear sense of what my, vision and passion and sweet spot is. And, I've certainly learned and, refined that over time. But then there's the times where you may have to go through some sacrifice. Like, I gave up the 6-figure job and the title and position and all that kind of stuff. And, I was living on a fraction of what I used to make, but I was willing to do it because I had already resolved in my heart that the price of quote unquote traditional success was not worth it. And so you may be in that place for an extended period of time, longer than you think. I know there was many times in the last few years, I was like, oh my gosh, when is this ever going to finally break through? And I'm just now barely starting to see that. And it's funny because literally today will be like a great milestone in that whole, journey. But don't give up, keep going forward. And I think that when you really do identify that sweet spot and that vision, you're going to start attracting people to you who are like-minded and who will partner with you. And that's certainly been the case for me. It has been a group effort for sure. There's no way I could have gotten to the place I am now in the last several years without multiple people, making huge contributions and helping me in a certain way. But like I said, you start attracting those people to you almost effortlessly without thinking about it once you have that, because that just kind of lives inside you, and people can sense that and manifest it. And, that kind of similar wavelength will kind of draw you together. So, collaboration, patience, and if the need exists, then maybe even a completely different direction. But I can say it is not an easy journey. It is definitely difficult, and there's ups and downs, but it is so worth it. And another way I describe passion is jet fuel for the soul.
Ooh, I love that. That's so good. Jet fuel for the soul. That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
that's going to give you that ability to pay the price
mm,
to whatever it takes to walk out your dream. Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of people out there on the internet and all kinds of marketing of just saying, like, oh, it's like effortless overnight success and riches, and you
yeah,
can just do this. And it's like, that's true, but it's not going to be in 30 days. Like, I guarantee you. Now, there's amazing things that happen very quickly. And I'm in the middle of that right now even, but it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a long time. Anything worth truly pursuing is going to be worth the sacrifice, and there will be a sacrifice. But if you have that passion, then, like I said, it's that jet fuel for the soul, that kind of just helps you to pay the price for what it's going to take to get to that point. And if it weren't for that and multiple people, helping me out throughout the years, there's no way I would have made it through to where I am today.
sure. Yeah. And I just love that expression, jet fuel for the soul, right? It's just so powerful because entrepreneurship is a journey, and it's always going to be a journey. And like you said, you're in the middle of amazing turnaround right now, but you yourself said this project has been months in the making, and I know you've talked about like having to tear yourself away from it at times and things like that, which tells me that you put in a lot of hours on it. So
Oh yeah.
it's not like this was an overnight thing for you either. And I think so many times, there's that poster, like, here's the iceberg, and you see like the top is what you see of success. And then the rest of it is down here. And it's like late nights, failures, all this kind of stuff. And it's just so true. And like, as business owners, we know that, but I just want to encourage anybody who's feeling like that right now, who's feeling like, oh my goodness, when am I going to get out of this? When is it going to be? I just want to encourage you that your breakthrough is in process, that you are completely normal, that you haven't failed. I love the way that I heard somebody say this: you only fail if you quit.
Yeah.
And now
Absolutely.
if you're in the wrong thing, maybe you should quit. But,
right.
but you only fail if you quit. And so as long as you keep going, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and know that right now, exactly where you're at in this moment, you are on that journey to get there, and you are going to see it, whether it takes months of putting in hard work like this has been for Ryan, or even, years and years and years to get you to this place where you're putting in months of hard work on this particular project. Right. So,
yep. And that's a great point. I just want to interject there too, Rachel, is that some people might say, oh man, you've been working on this for 3 or 4 months. That's great. It's like, well, really, that's the tip of the iceberg. I've been working on this really for at least 3 or 4 years, probably closer to 10 years, to be honest, because I was learning, through my own experiences as an investor, doing financial analysis and budgeting and planning, and learning, like, again, my natural passion and strength that always led me, I found myself gravitating to reading all kinds of articles about, investing, the economy and finance and stuff like that. I'm just fascinated by it. But that's been years and thousands and tens of thousands of hours if you add it all up. So it comes together, but then it seems like all of a sudden things happen all at once, and like a bunch of things happen all at once. And that's the case too. And that's to your point of the encouragement for people, like, whatever you're walking through right now, whatever you're overcoming, like, that's all part of the value you're going to add later. And none of that's wasted. And you're, for 10 years, I've been searching for my sweet spot. And then I finally had language to clarify what that means, and now can actually like help people do that and actually get paid, well to do it, which is phenomenal, but it wasn't that way for a long time. So, but as you're going through these processes, again, you're going to relate to people and have the most authority. And I think, even from a branding or a marketplace perspective, you're going to have, I think, stickier connections with people when you've walked through it, because people can tell if you're the real deal and you've walked through it or not. And then sometimes people are really good at faking it, but everything that you're doing is becoming a part of who you are that's actually equipping you for ultimately what you're going to step into. And so for me, it's converged all these things, the financial and investing thing, the personal coaching, the writing and speaking, all that stuff coming together. And it seems like it's all coming together at one time here, where it seemed like it was just a very, very tiny little trickle in every category for a long time. And it's just like all of a sudden, a bunch of things are happening all at once. So, I find that things like this tend to be more exponential than linear. You may feel like you're going nowhere for years and years, and then all of a sudden, just very quickly, you hit that exponential increase on the curve. So yeah, it's probably going to look a lot different than you thought it would be, but I promise it'll be better than you thought as well.
Ooh, I love that. Yes. And I love how you talked about, people know when it's real and they know when it's fake. And so something that we are so passionate about at the Brand Boss Studio is authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. This is not about being who you're not. And this is not about trying to be who you think you should be, or you think, more importantly, it's not trying to market yourself as who you think other people want you to be.
Right.
This is about showing up authentically as who you are. And that, to your point about the sweet spot, that's where you have the most impact too, right? I mean, I'm not a tennis player, so forgive me if this is out of left field, but I'm guessing when you hit the sweet spot, that ball goes far.
Yeah, it goes very fast and accurate at the same time. So if you want it to go far, it can go far, or if you want it to be just a quick little hit, but you're going to have the greatest power, accuracy, and effectiveness exactly when you're hitting in that sweet spot. And it's a perfect analogy for what you're talking about.
And that comes from being in alignment with who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Not trying to go against the grain. Yeah. That'll just burn you out quicker than anything. And I've done it both ways, and I can tell you it's better to do it working from your sweet spot than trying to be who you think you're supposed to be, or someone else thinks you're supposed to be, or what you think is going to be the most successful or profitable, whatever the case is. And that's even a business thing too. Like if you're focusing on money, it's ultimately going to fall flat. But if you're focusing on it for a higher purpose, the money will be a byproduct. The clients and the influence will be a byproduct, but that comes from who you are and your purpose. That's, going to attract those people and cause that increase.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Because trust comes before transactions. And when you focus on the relationship, the transactions will follow. But whenever you focus more on the transaction than the relationship, you've just crossed the line into manipulation. Mm-hmm. So, and then the other thing I know, I love this quote by Jim Rohn, is that money follows value. Mm-hmm. And so when you are showing up powerfully and authentically as who you are, and bringing to the marketplace, your strengths, your service, your passion, and your pain in that, did I get them all right? in that sweet spot, that's providing genuine value to people, because then at that point, not that there's anything wrong, certainly with, I want to be careful how I say this, right? Like products are good, services are good, but it's so much more powerful when you can partner with who you are and that product, who you are and that service, right? What you are bringing in terms of value just goes through the roof at that point. Which again,
especially when you've done it yourself, and that's a big thing that I, whether I'm coaching somebody or I'm, giving them financial advice, like I don't ever preach anything that I haven't been practicing for a long time. And that's where I know it's going to work for some people, because this isn't hypothetical, like I didn't have to do this. Like I didn't have to join this industry or sell this product or service. Like I chose to, because of the journey I'd been through of learning and knowledge and experience and discovery, and seeing the impact it had on me, whether it was, this discovery of the sweet spot or a bunch of the different financial, investments and strategies that I use and I help my clients use. Is I'm never going to sell you something I haven't already bought first and benefited from greatly. And that's, I think, a great point for when it comes to branding and messaging is, I'm not just selling you something because it sounded like a cool thing to sell, or it's like got a high profit margin or whatever. Like I really, really believe in this product or service, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And when you're that passionate and you have that personal experience where you can share personal examples, like when I'm coaching people, It's 95% me just listening. And then what I speak is usually just relating to a personal experience I've had that connects with what they're going through. It's not just something I read in a book. Now, I read a lot of books. I'm also very, studious when it comes to personal development and all these kinds of things, but I'm only speaking from my own personal overflow, whether it's coaching or financial planning or anything else. It's, I know that this has worked for me. It may or may not work for you, probably will, but I'm not going to try to sell you something, that I haven't benefited from. And I think that comes through loud and clear in your marketing, whether or not people are aware of that.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those intangibles, right? People can feel it a mile away. They might not even know that's what they're feeling.
Right. Like people, when I talk to them about investing and budgeting even, which most people hate, I get so fired up about it that they're like, man, like, I can't believe this, but I'm fired up to do a budget and like learn about investments, and they're like not at all wired that way, but it's because it's that passion and that enthusiasm is infectious, it's contagious in a good way. And when you're excited about something and you can speak from authority of having done the research and had the experience, then you're going to people might be like, I don't know why I'm getting so excited about this, but like, man, I'm fired up. Like you got me like sold on this. And it's because I've been sold as myself as a customer, and I've seen that it's, it's a worthy investment. So I think that can come through with a lot of people that may not think that they would connect with you, but just because of the energy, passion, enthusiasm, and the authenticity and integrity that comes with that, they're just like, you know what? There's something about this person or this product or whatever it is that I resonate with it.
Yeah. And to your point, I love that you just mentioned that because I wanted to go there. And this doesn't mean that your sweet spot has to be coaching, right? This isn't to say that you have to do what Ryan does.
Right.
I will never be a financial planner. I'm just not wired that way. Right. But I mean, I'm guessing Ryan will probably never be a brand boss either, but who knows? So
probably a good bet.
So, but that's part of it, right? So whether it is, we talked about product a second ago, and I just want to come back to that because I know some amazing entrepreneurs who are launching products for the very first time. And I don't want them to hear this and get discouraged and say, oh, okay, well, that's awesome, but I'm not a coach. Like to your point, it could be a product that has changed your life. Or it could be, like this woman who made the trinkets. It was something she loved to do. Or like, I feel like there are ways that even if you're not like taking this sweet spot and being a coach, like Ryan has talked about, can you give some, I know you're all about practical. Yeah. Can you give some maybe practical examples of what that could potentially look like as far as, a product or a service or somebody who maybe is listening to this going, that's awesome. I'm not sure how it relates to what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I only use my own examples just to hopefully flesh it out to give you ideas, but that is in no way to try to limit it. It's specifically to try to help you think of what that looks like for you. So like we gave the example of, the person I interviewed on the podcast who made the trinkets and stuff like that. I've got, one of my friends is really good at fixing cars. Now that is probably as far away from my sweet spot as I could possibly get. But he's really good at it. He has the same thing, for him, just replace, researching financial planning and investments or, personal development with cars and mechanics and how to fix things. And he is naturally good at that. And now, I just paid him to fix my car because I'd rather bless him than, pay way too much money at a dealership that's just a big corporation. Not that I have anything against that, but, it's like, he's found a way to monetize his passion and his strength. And so he can, do that. It doesn't feel like work for him. Like he came over, in the bitter cold. I'm in Colorado, it was snowing. It was like, dark already. He had to have, it was freezing cold and he's, got a light on because it's, he didn't have like good lighting. And he just does that for like 3 hours. I was like, oh man, you can totally come back later. He's like, oh no, I'm already in your garage. And I was like, wow, for me, that would be terrible. But for him, again, it didn't feel like work nearly to the extent it would have for me or somebody else. So, and maybe if I'm trying to think of somebody else's example, like somebody else I know, she's really good at, social media and marketing. And that's not, my strong suit. I'll use it and I'm functional with it, but it's, she just loves it and she goes for it. So, I mean, there's any number of things you could, we could go on for, literally any occupation or anything that you do. But again, I think the key is finding what do you naturally gravitate to over time without even thinking about it. Like consistently, you find yourself reading, talking about, or doing this thing, or being interested in people like this and connecting. Like I just find that most people, whether or not they are aware, they have a certain gravity or way that they naturally kind of flow towards certain things, and just start taking, note of that. And also asking and getting feedback, or remembering intentionally when people expressed a really sincere gratitude or appreciation for something you did, or a way that you had an impact, even if you kind of slough it off because to you, it's so natural. It feels like, you're almost unaware the impact has occurred, but to them, it's been like, no, really, like, that really means a lot. And sometimes we can just be like, oh no, thank you, I get it. And they're just like, no, really, you don't get it, because this is something that really meant a lot to that person. And those are great indicators of, I think, where you could be tapping into your sweet spot and where you could kind of go further in that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, you kind of answered it, but I'm going to circle back to that one more time. So I know you have a whole workshop on this, and I'm not asking you to get into that, but is there maybe like 2 or 3 steps you could share about how to, I know, I love how you're just talking about that you gravitate to. Mm-hmm. For anybody who's listening, feeling like, okay, now I'm tracking with you, I'm starting to get it. How do I start to identify my sweet spot? Like, are there some questions they should ask themselves? Are there some,
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've got that. You can, if you want, you can feel free to include a link to this teaching I have. It's all on a website. You can, access it for free. Okay. I kind of walk you through it. But I have a list of questions I come up with, and there's all kinds of different ones. I've got my list. Everybody's got different versions of how to express different things. But one question that I love asking people is, what do you love doing so much that you would do it for free or even pay a lot of money to do it?
Wow.
Right? That's a great indicator of something that is an intrinsic motivator or intrinsically satisfying. And again, ironically, when you focus on that and not the practical aspect of the money, when it's just something that is so part of you and you just love doing so much, that's actually the thing I think you should get the most compensation from, because it's coming from a pure place where it's actually who you are. You're not trying to be somebody else or fit into a box or whatever. And so, yeah, I'd say, what would you do just because you love it so much? What would you do for free, or better yet, pay a lot of money for? And, for some people that might be travel. I love traveling. I've spent a lot of money on traveling and I love it. If I could get paid to travel the world, which I'm believing is part of the,
sign me up.
That would be amazing. So it's, turning your daydream into a day job is what, there's another group I'm kind of part of that does this. They're called Vision Possible. We're going to be launching some stuff, hopefully at the beginning of next year. But they have that tagline. And I love that, turn your daydream into a day job. So, those things you're thinking about. But then another really practical thing that I think has helped me a lot, and I think everybody usually enjoys this, right? Because it's so uncanny how much you can relate to it, is like different, inventories or personality tests like DISC, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder. I go through a lot of that. That's one of the things I've studied for, years and years as well. And I think, you got to be careful, because some people, it's almost like they make their identity out of their top 5 strengths or their Myers-Briggs type profile or whatever their thing is. And, those I think are good, helpful indicators, but I found a lot of value in those. Like, if you feel stuck, just take one of those, answer the questions honestly. Don't try to, answer the way you think you should. Just be as honest as possible. And then if that stuff resonates with you, kind of dig into that further. And there's a lot of great tools. So, downloading the StrengthsFinder book and the code that goes with it, taking that. There's a lot of free versions of Myers-Briggs and, the DISC test and some different things like that. So I would say that's helpful. And then, like I said, I've got a whole, list of resources and a link that you can access online for free that could be, helpful for people as well. So, yeah, there's no one way to do it, but I think just having some kind of way to take inventory of who you are, or help get clarification from an external source, because again, it's kind of hard to see yourself sometimes. I think those are all really valuable ways to start looking into and operating from your sweet spot.
Absolutely. Can I speak to that DISC test for a second?
Please.
So I had an experience with this myself, because I love those too. And I've taken a bunch of those over the years. And I took the DISC test, I'm going to say it was 2 years ago. And I was floored by the results. And here's the thing. Sometimes we go through things in life that cause us to operate as a different version than who we are. And one of the things that I had believed, I actually got a wrong result on a Myers-Briggs test one time that somebody was giving me. And so it caused me to believe that that was my identity. And it was an identity that I stuck on myself. And there were lots of other reasons that went into it too, but it didn't help the situation. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, then this really just must be who I am. Versus, oh no, this is a, response of trauma that you went through. This is a thing, that's a whole other thing. So, but anyway, all of that to say, not to go off into all that, but to go back to the DISC test, when I took the DISC test, I was reading through all of these qualities and characteristics of what is true of you, right? And so I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, this is true of me. This is true of me. This is true of me. So one of the lies that I believed most of my life, starting back when I was a little girl and I had to sell candy bars for, school choir, right? Like, was that I was terrible at sales. And so I just believed that, oh, I'm just bad at sales. I spent pretty much my entire adult life just believing like, oh, I'm bad at sales. Well, if you're bad at something, you're either going to like go into performance mode, first of all, or you're going to run away from it. And I've done both sides of that equation. But so then I'm reading and I am an almost off the charts I on the DISC test. And so I'm reading this description.
A DISC test I, not a Myers-Briggs I. That's
not a Myers-Briggs
almost
I.
Opposite.
Almost opposite, which the Myers-Briggs test that I had taken pegged me as an I.
Right. Yeah.
And so so I had operated under that identity for a lot of years. So anyway, of course, there's a much longer story than that. But so I'm reading this, I'll never forget it. I'm reading this DISC test results and I see naturally good at sales. And my mouth fell open.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like my whole life, I've just believed that like, oh, well, this is just not something that I'm good at. When actually like the makeup of who I am is naturally wired at this, because I'm naturally, people are magnetized to me and stuff like that. Not in any weird, like manipulative way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just like, oh, well, if I'm built for this, then I can do it. So the next time that it came time to make an offer, that's in my mind now. So I'm not going into, even though, I've done a lot of coaching and I learned a lot and I would like, there's a difference between going into something feeling like I'm not good at this, but I'm going to make myself be able to do it. I remember that next, discovery call or whatever it was that I had after reading that, I went into it saying, oh, I'm naturally good at sales. Wow. And it started shifting things for me. And, I'm still on that journey, but, 2020, we've made feels like 1 million offers at this point, right? And that only gets more and more and more. I mean, that's business. You're not in business if you're not making offers. Right. So you can imagine what it's like being in business, thinking that you're just naturally not good at making offers. So that little thing, I didn't mean to go so deep into all that, but just as an illustration that those things are so powerful. First of all, make sure you do the right ones and that there is power in reviewing it with a coach. Cause that's the other thing, that DISC test, I was reviewing with a coach. Yeah. Who could help me see things I couldn't see for myself. But when I saw that, I was able to, like we've talked about on this podcast before, come into alignment with what is actually true of me. And it started shifting things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really important that you get a variety of counselors, whether those are actual people or try, like what I've done. I've probably taken like 10 or 20 of these different types of tests, and I'll see, because, a lot of it's self-reporting based. It's more qualitative than quantitative if it's, based on your own subjective responses. Right. But over time, there will be a clear like pattern that emerges. And so I started looking at like, if one, cause I'd kind of look at one's like, yeah. And for me, I'm tough to pin down because I'm right on the edge of a lot of things. Like I said, I'm super practical, detail oriented on the one hand, and also super visionary and relational on the other. So it's like, for me, it's a real challenge to figure out what it is. And so I would just kind of take a lot of them and see what emerged. But I would say the biggest thing is when when it's some kind of test or personality profile is correctly really tapping into who you are, there'll be like almost like a harmonic resonance at your heart level. There will be this resonant frequency of like, yes, that's it. And like, it'll feel right. You'll feel known. You'll feel like that is who I am. Not that it's my identity, but like, it's just, yes, that is so true. So I would say just that sense of encouragement and that it's life-giving and that it's like revelatory, that should be the feeling you have when you've correctly, been categorized, if you want to call it that. It should be life-giving. It should be encouraging. It should make you feel known and understood. And it shouldn't be this heavy thing of like, oh, I suck. Because even the things like that, I mean, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And I know some of my weaknesses. It's like, even knowing that, the way it's described to me in the right profile and the right test, that is even life-giving. So I'm like, oh, no wonder that's so difficult for me, or no wonder I have a problem with people like this, because there's this, fundamental, just difference in the way we see the world and relate. And it's actually, it's not only good for you because you get more self-awareness and self-discovery, but it also helps you to be more aware and I think appreciate other people for the way that they're made and designed. Absolutely. So it should be encouraging is the bottom line takeaway, and try a bunch of different tests, talk to different people about it. Don't just take your first one and be like, well, that's it, I'm terrible at sales. And then you live with that lie for 20 years of your life. It's just like, it should feel good. It should feel right. That's, that is I kind of hate saying stuff like that sometimes as a very left brain person, but there is just like, you'll know.
There's a resonance. You'll know.
There is a resonance. Yep.
You'll know. This is me. This is who I am. It's that feeling of like somebody just got in my head right now.
Yeah. Like, have you been following me around with a video camera for the last week? That's insane. Like, that's the feeling I've had several times. It was just like unbelievable.
Same. Oh, well, this has been such a powerful conversation. Is there anything else you want to add?
We didn't talk about this much in this one, but I talk about it at length in the book. And the other thing I would just say is, and it's related to the sweet spot, but getting out of a place of striving and performance and self-effort.
Go for that for a minute.
Entering into rest. I'm not going to go super deep because I know we're getting pretty long here, but I would just say, check out, the book and the website and all those things. You'll see more about that. But I think one of the things for me being naturally very driven and, goal-oriented, which again is good until it's not, one of the most profound revelations I've had is also like the value of rest and not striving and letting things come to you. Now, that's not to say you're not being intentional or diligent and all those things, but like, the more I let things go and don't try to force things to happen, the more effortlessly things come to me. And it's just like amazing. So that's a whole other thing. I'll just kind of put that little snippet out there and hopefully pique your interest. You can check out, the website and the book. But that's another way that I think makes you really powerful as a brand boss, is when you're just at, you're comfortable in your own skin and you're obviously at a place of rest and peace. You're not striving, because that can come through too, that sales, if you're talking about making offers and sales, that can really come through when you're like trying really hard to make it happen, either because you just need the money or because you believe in it a lot and you really know that this is going to work for somebody, but it's like you're trying to force it. The more you can just kind of rest and relax and let it unfold, which has been a very counterintuitive journey for me. But I cannot overemphasize the value of that. So just, I would just kind of add that as another caveat to kind of related to what we talked about.
That's awesome. Thank you. Wow. Well, for anybody who is interested to connect with you further, to do some sweet spot coaching, because that's something that you do, or to dig into the financial planning or any of the amazing services that you offer, what's the best way for them to connect with you, Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I would say the best way is go to my website, which is abetterwaypodcast.com. And that's more for the coaching and the book and all the stuff, what I really consider more of the ministry stuff, even though it is a business. For the financial planning stuff, you can still reach out to me through there. But if you will go to unbridledwealth.com, you can learn a little bit more about that. But I'd say the best way is probably just reach out and have a conversation with me, because, it's kind of, both of those things are a little nebulous to some people. And I think just having a conversation, like I said, I never want to tell somebody something until I kind of know their situation anyways. So you can schedule, an appointment with me through the website, and, you've got the resources with the book and everything there too. So yeah, just going to the website, abetterwaypodcast.com, reach out to me directly. I'd love to connect with you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, you heard it here. Go connect with Ryan at abetterwaypodcast.com. Ryan, again, thank you so much for being here today. Brand Boss, we hope you found great value in today's episode. If you did, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. We want to empower as many as we can to go out and rock your brand like a boss. Catch you on the next episode. Keep rocking.